Welcome back to SV Ramble On, and thanks again for watching. We're in the middle of doing the alternator project and had some problems with some of the parts from Valmar. Had to send them back and get a different lower pulley, and also the water pump didn't seem to line up with the lower pulley. So while I'm waiting on those parts, I figured I could get some work done on the engine. One of the things I had to do was drain all the coolant out of the engine in order to change the water pump to the new Valmar water pump. As long as I got the engine coolant drained all the way down, I figured now would be a good time to hook our water heater up to the engine cooling circuit. And what that does, it circulates antifreeze through the system and into the water heater and heats the water while the engine's running. So when we're unplugged, it's a 110 volt water heater, and when we're unplugged, anytime we're running the motor, we can heat water. So I want to do that, and also as long as the engine's out of commission right now, I'm going to go ahead and do an oil and filter change. So we'll start tearing things apart and putting it back together. So what we got here is an engine oil pump. It actually extracts the oil with it creates a little vacuum. You pump it a couple of times and it sucks the oil out of the dipstick tube. So the first thing I'm going to do, pull the dipstick, pop this little tube in the top, and then stick the tiny end down in the dipstick. Changing the oil on this diesel is actually pretty difficult. There is a drain plug on the front you can get to, but it's real hard to manipulate a pan or anything underneath to catch the oil once it starts coming out. So what you do is you stick this end in the pump, this end goes down in the dipstick, and hopefully I'm gonna try and run this thing, use the curve to get it kind of toward the back of the oil pan. It's got a kind of a little bit of a curve to it. And the engine sump is in the back. Okay, so I'm on the bottom of the oil pan right now. Okay, I can feel it touching the bottom of the oil pan. All you do is give it a couple of pumps. Now, I wasn't able to run the engine. Normally I like to run the engine a little bit. It warms up the oil, but it also takes time again to drain everything down once the oil's warm. So it's starting to pull oil slowly. And this thing also has an automatic shut-off. So once the canister gets full, there's a shut-off that cuts off the supply. And then there's a little bleeder here where you can pop it out. So one good thing about this engine setup is they have a remote filter mount on the back of the engine block, and oil comes through a hose off the bottom of the engine, gets pumped through the filter, and then back down through the engine oil and transmission cooler, which is hooked up to the freshwater cooling circuit on the boat. Okay, there it comes. Anything gonna come gurgling out the top? Should be a little bit of oil left in the top end because they're Let's take a little bit of clean oil and go around the washer before you screw it on. Now, here's the trick. Is getting a almost full oil filter screw back on. So between pumping out the engine oil and draining the oil filter, I came up with exactly 1 gallon of oil removed from the engine. So bag up the filter, take this down to the recycler place. You can take it to pretty much any Autoport store where we're at, and they'll recycle it for free. So I'm gonna add 1 gallon back And then once I fire up the engine and it circulates through the system, then I'll go ahead and top it off once more. And the new Fram filter is a little bit shorter than the Perkins filter for some reason. So we're right there, halfway between minimum and maximum. So I'm going to leave that there for now and add a little bit more when we fire up the engine. So that's about all there is to changing the oil and filter on a diesel engine in a sailboat. Ours is a Perkins 4108, but pretty much the same thing applies to any diesel engine. So now that all the engine water is drained in order to replace the pump for the Balmar alternator kit, I figured now is a good time to hook up the water heater for our fresh water supply. So the water heater is a 110 volt Isotemp. It's a 15 liter, about 4 gallons. It works off 110 volts on shore power, but it also has inputs for plumbing to the engine cooling system, which is the antifreeze water mixture. So how this works is the engine rotates in a clockwise direction as you're looking at it aft. Right now I have everything tore apart. The freshwater pump pushes antifreeze coolant mixture from the header tank. It goes through a thermostat down here, takes it through the block, sends it through all the piston sleeves, and also sends it through engine oil, and back here is transmission oil. Each one of those pumps fluid back and forth through a series of chambers that are cooled through water jackets that the freshwater system, which is antifreeze and water, those circulate back and forth, and these go basically counter flow back and forth through the direction that the freshwater antifreeze flows through this hose into this exchanger. Everything pumps back through, and once it gets through the engine block, it comes through. There's a hose down here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's this orange hose right here. This orange hose that's wiggling around right here, I think you can see it. That feeds back through the top of the engine and back into here and back into the engine block through pipe fittings. I installed a brass T, I think it was bronze T, couple of nipples, and this is the temperature alarm for if the engine gets too hot. It sends off a temperature alarm at the control panel in the helm, and then we know the engine's overheating. So what I'm going to do is disconnect this hose. I'm going to intercept that, send it through into here. These fittings are for engine water. So we got an inlet and we got an outlet. It basically creates a continuous loop of coolant, and that's going to run through the Isotemp water heater. But basically it's going to flow engine coolant through this circulation loop and heat water when we're not on shore power. So that's the next project. So let's get started. Let's take off this hose. This is the return hose from the oil cooler, which is transmission and engine oil combined, both of them together. So this hose is too short, I'm not going to use it. So this fitting here isn't facing the right way now in order for me to run the water to the heat exchanger. So I need to rotate this thing in a clockwise direction, which tightens the threads, and see if I can make this thing move. Might go a little bit more just to put it between the two. There's two hose clamps coming off the header tank. They go to the exhaust manifold. There, just a little bit more. So what'll happen is this hose This is 5/8 Gates water heater hose. It's high temperature hose. You can get it in any auto parts store. This thing's gonna go on here. It's gonna go down here. It's gonna go underneath the floor and back up to the water heater. So I'm in the engine room and I got the heater hose pulled through. I'm gonna put the hose clamp on now. Fit it on the hose fitting coming out the transmission cooler. Right next to the engine mount, there's a little nipple comes off the transmission engine oil cooler, and I'm gonna whittle this hose on it. Oh man. Alright, now I'm gonna stand on my head, twist sideways a little bit, just to get this coupling on, this hose clamp. So now we just install the fittings to connect to the hose. Running Teflon tape on the threads is going to be a bit of a trick. I gotta wedge myself in here. I always go Teflon tape and pipe dope. So, a little pipe dope, PTFE, go clockwise, because that's the way the threads screw on. So I had to put this together, and it's a coupling and a street 90 in order to clear all the other fittings here. We'll thread that on. Gotta hope I don't leak. Hope not. Alright. Cut it off right about there. Again with the pipe dope. Got gray Teflon tape on it. And let's screw this one in here. So this one goes into the 90 fitting. Alright, that one's tight. Alright. The hose and the hose clamp. Alright, so those are the connections to the water heater, and should be all right. I got one more connection to the engine block to finish up, and then we're done. And then when antifreeze water mixture flows through the engine, it'll also flow through the heat exchanger here and here. It'll go in one side and out the other, and it'll heat our water when the engine's running. So